Morning Glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Hugh Hewitt live from the West Coast. And if any of you watch the weather this weekend, you know why I run away to the West Coast for a few weeks every winter. I must say congratulations to my listeners on WMOH 1450, The Ticket in Hamilton, Ohio. All Bengals fans. I know you're all Bengals fans down there, you poor misguided lost tribe of Ohio. But I will say the second best team in Ohio is going to the Super Bowl after a stunning upset win over the Chiefs yesterday, where they will take on OBJ, who apparently can play, just didn't want to play for the Cleveland Browns. So it's Rams-Bengals. But my friends on WMOH 1450, The Ticket, my hat is off to you. The Bengals are terrific. Now, I assume that the Rams will be studying the November 7 game between the Browns and the Bengals, which the Browns won in Cincinnati 41-16. So the second best team in Ohio. And then the Browns beat the Bengals in a throwaway game, last game of the year. That doesn't count. I don't even think Burrow played in that game. Joe Burrow is amazing. Jamarcus is amazing. Everybody's amazing. Go Bengals. Never thought I'd say it. But Ohio, second best team. AFC North is the best division in football, and everybody knows it. Steelers are going to be in the wilderness for a few decades, but good for them. Now, the other affiliates I'm worried about this morning, Portland, Maine, 560 AM, 98.5 WGAN. My people in Portland, I hope you are digging out. To my people in Manchester, WFEA, AM 1370, and in Keene, New Hampshire, WKBK, AM 1290, and FM 94.1, I hope you are digging out. I thought about my friends at Seabags. I mentioned Seabags occasionally. It's a great company in Maine, which the fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I invested a little bit of money a long time ago, and we've watched it grow and grow and grow. But their main store, their big new headquarters store in downtown, I think it's on Congress Street in Portland, they got like 17 inches of snow on Saturday. It was a big blow. A big nor'easter blew into Boston and then up to Maine. And Maine can get cold, but it doesn't usually get that kind of snow. So I'm hoping everyone at Seabags is able to get back to work. Everyone in Maine. Tens of thousands, according to the Washington Post, are still without power in Massachusetts. Now, that's western Massachusetts. I mean, it fell from Maryland to Maine. It's just one of those reasons I like to be out here for a few months. North Korea tests its biggest missile since 2017. Joe Biden calls for talks. Portugal's ruling socialists won an absolute majority as the voters of that country at a snap election punished their, quote, progressive left. The hard left, the Elizabeth Warren left, the communist left, the Ilhan Omar squad left. Their equivalents in Portugal got pummeled. And the nice center left, essentially the old Democrats in the United States, of whom there are very few left now, won an absolute majority, and so Portugal stays in the EU, and they got rid of the crazy lefties. I think that's an omen, though, for our election in the fall. The hard left is running the Democratic Party right over a cliff. I have a Washington Post column on how the reset must begin with the firing of Tony Fauci and Rochelle Walensky and Jeff Zients and anyone who has anything to do with the COVID policies. They're such a nightmare. Fed tries to thread needle by raising rates without endangering economy, according to the Washington Post. Only once before has the 108-year-old Federal Reserve faced a moment when it needed to raise interest rates from near zero to the threat, to meet the threat of rising prices. That was in 2015, before the COVID. We're going to see if they can pull off anything other than a car crash. I don't think so. But they always have the option that Erdogan used over the weekend. They have even bigger inflation in Turkey than we do in the United States. Erdogan is worse at managing the economy than Joe Biden, though he's had longer at it to be bad. So he fired his chief statistician. That is another way to deal with inflation, is to fire your chief statistician. According to the Financial Times, the world's largest wealth fund manager has warned that permanent inflation is back, and it's going to hit every kind of instrument of growth, bonds and stocks. The U.S. is finalizing sanctions against Russia for Ukraine aggression. We talk a lot. We argue a lot. We threaten a lot. We still haven't said anything. The UK, though, the United Kingdom, which is on edge this morning as they await the report on Partygate from Sue Gray, the permanent civil servant who is preparing who did what when at Downing Street during the lockdown report, which may drop during the show this morning. If it breaks news, I'll bring it to you live. But they're also finalizing sanctions against the oligarchs. And I love this. If you go to London, I haven't been to London in 4 or 5 years, but if you go to London, you can't miss oligarchs sort of wandering around town with their entourages and their limos. It's where all the Russian money goes, because after all, who wants to be in Moscow? So they go to London, and the British government is prepared to take that money. Good for them if Russia invades Ukraine. The Brits are doing a U-turn on mandatory COVID vaccinations for the National Health Service. Now, underscore, not going to require them. U-turn. Number one, Omicron is very, very contagious and not very deadly. Number two, Omicron appears, according to a new study in Japan, to be treatable by ivermectin, and that is a randomized double-blind trial of ivermectin against Omicron. Appears to be very effective. Dr. Collins told me on this show a number of times, because, I'm neither committed to or against ivermectin. I just I'm vaccinated. I have a booster. I think that's very effective. There's new evidence today. It helps you in many ways, prevents long COVID as well. But I wanted to know whether or not ivermectin worked. And Collins kept saying, we'll study it when they have never finished the study. Well, they finished a study in Japan that shows that ivermectin works against Omicron at least. So the Brits are getting ready to dump mandates for vaccines because their healthcare workers are going to quit in too large a numbers. Omicron pushes health authorities towards learning to live with COVID-19, according to the Wall Street Journal this morning. The Omicron variant spreads so quickly, generally causes such a mild form of illness among vaccinated populations, that countries are tolerating greater COVID-19 outbreaks, willingly letting infections balloon to levels not long ago would have constituted public health crises. Now, understand, that's normal. It's a good thing that Omicron is much more contagious and much less deadly. And it's just our public health agencies react with the time of a moo cow. I mean, really, they're like Daisy up in the pasture. Huh? Omicron is more contagious and less deadly? Yes. And they should be reacting. Some Democratic and Republican governors are looking towards a future after Omicron, according to the New York Times. They'd better, I'm telling you, the Democratic governors are going to get crushed. School board members are going to get crushed. I know schools across the country are closed today. They're calling it asynchronous learning days in some places. They're calling it snow days in other places. The school districts don't want to go back to school. They want Omicron to pass. But the parents will simply rise up if they so they're locking the kids out via other means. But the parents won't forget. They will not vote for one school board member who's an incumbent right now unless they are loudly in favor of making up for lost time. And new boards will fire school districts, superintendents. That's going to happen. Here's the Israeli data. Long COVID symptoms are less likely in vaccinated people. Get vaccinated, get boosted. Living by the code. In China, according to the New York Times, COVID-era controls may outlast the virus. You think? In a totalitarian regime, they found new ways to control people? Yeah, they're not going to let people go back to normal in China. The United States, we're not sticking around. Tens of thousands of Hong Kong citizens are fleeing to Great Britain as the Chinese government, led by President General Secretary Xi, becomes more and more totalitarian. And there's a big story on them in the Telegraph. Why? And they answer, what are you, nuts? We're not staying under that government. And they get mandatory must-issue passports under the Hong Kong independence transfer from independent free Hong Kong to the People's Republic of China many years ago, Margaret Thatcher's big mistake. New Chinese documentary got through the censors, and it's eliciting a lot of criticism of General Secretary Xi right before the Olympics, which is great, which is just great. Embarrassed the heck out of him. When we come back, Spotify, Joni Mitchell, Neil Young, and Joe Rogan. What an absurd situation. Leave Joe Rogan alone and go play your music. I'll be right back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Welcome back, America. We're playing covers of declining and aging out rockers who don't want their music on Spotify anymore today. I'm joined by Salena Zito. It is the Yinzer Report. I get comments whenever I go out. What are you laughing at, Salena?
Your commentary on music and aging rockers is pretty funny.
Well, Arthur Brooks has this wonderful new book out called From Strength to Strength about growing old. And it's what you should and shouldn't do when you get past 50 and then 60 and then 70. And what you shouldn't do after 70, if you're an aging rock and roller, is try to be relevant to politics. Because it ain't going to work, Salena. Do you agree with me on this?
Oh, I completely agree. And it's just, and it's astounding to me to be of a certain age and to watch some of these rockers who, in my youth, I thought were these like fierce anti-establishment figures. Turns out not so much.
Yeah.
And that someone that sang the song "Keep On Rockin' in the Free World" and Ohio is now offended by what he hears from a podcaster on the same network as him is just ridiculous. I mean, it's just childish. It's like something mean girls do when they're 12.
It is. My buddy Tim Butler, my law school roommate at Michigan, one of them, who's a councilman in Ohio. I think I'm urging him to run for the Ohio Supreme Court because he's such a fine lawyer. Tim texted me this morning. I read somewhere someone said that the 1969 Joni Mitchell and Neil Young would be embarrassed by their 2022 versions. That's perfect. That's perfect.
That is absolutely perfect. They bear no resemblance of the person they either were or maybe they never were and were using it to acquire fame.
Well, Neil Young has been all over the board. People forget, and we can't play, and I don't think anyone has ever covered Let's Roll, which he put out after the 9/11 attacks. Joni Mitchell has always been Joni Mitchell, kind of there, not there. Beautiful voice, beautiful song, but you're never going to actually go for life coach advice to Joni Mitchell. I'm just curious, Salena. You and I are the same age. We're getting up there, but we work in a field where age isn't penalized the way that rock and rollers are. Only Mick Jagger has made the deal with the devil that he can still do what he did 50 years ago and be effective at it.
Well, and because Mick Jagger has never stopped being Mick Jagger, he has always been authentic to who he is. I think the problem with some of these folks that have decided to step into politics is that they're going outside of who they really are, and it just screams false to people our age, but also to young people who know a little historically about who they once were and look at this and say, oh, come on, seriously?
Yeah. A little bit is a lot. I went to Joan Baez at the big auditorium on Pennsylvania Avenue in D.C. when Brett Kavanaugh hearings were underway, and I'll go listen to Joan Baez forever. And she did about one comment about Kavanaugh, got some applause, and then stayed away. Jackson Brown, I went to hear him in San Diego a couple of years ago. No politics. I think the smart ones just realize they're not going to shut up and sing. They have their opinions, but they know the people aren't paying for their political opinions.
That's exactly right. People are paying for their talent and the nostalgia and all the emotions that their music brings to the audience, whether they're new or have been with them since their inception. That's why people are paying to see them.
Now, Salena, I don't know if you listen to Joe Rogan. I listen to him through my boys who are, young, 30 and 33, and they love Rogan. They love Rogan, and they listen to his long-form podcast. So he is to Spotify what Rush was to talk radio. He bit them all. The rest of us just live in it. And Joe Rogan has explained and now demonstrated that podcasting can be enormously profitable. What do you think of him?
I think he's interesting and compelling, and that is what good storytelling is all about. This is sort of what everyone is missing. Is Rogan is bringing back what a lot of what a lot of Americans love and we don't do anymore, and that's compelling storytelling. That's compelling dialogue between two people. And you might not always agree with it. However, you learn something from it. You either learn to make an argument against and or for what he's the person he's engaging with, and that's like very good intellectual exercise, right?
Yeah, when he starts spitballing on something, I can tell, but it's like when I hear Dwayne talking about music, he's just making it up. I can tell, but nevertheless, it's entertaining. So, have you asked people yet? Have you written up yet what people in Pennsylvania think about Rogan? Because I think this is actually another blue bubble moment where they have no idea how stupid they appear to the ordinary American.
Well, I have had these conversations with people, but I haven't written about it. But you're absolutely right. People are all over the place with him because he's all over the place, which, by the way, is normal.
Yes, normal is what normal is. SalenaZito.com for everything Salena writes. You don't want to, that wasn't much of a Yinzer report. That was just our commentary on the idiocy of the weekend. We'll be right back, America. Stay tuned. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Thank you, Salena. We'll be right back. Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Hugh Hewitt live from the West Coast. The breaking news is that Susan Gray, senior British civil servant, has delivered the so-called Gray Report on number 10, Downing Street, Boris Johnson violations of lockdown rules. No word yet on what it says or what it will mean. I'll keep you posted on that. I'm joined by Jake Sherman of Punchbowl News. Good morning, Jake. How are you?
I'm wonderful, Hugh, and I know you're a Browns fan, but your Bengals, your home state's Bengals are headed to the Super Bowl. So
I try and explain. I just tweeted out that I'll be on Special Report, the panel tonight, and I'm bracing myself for Bengals, Burrows, and OBJ talk should it occur. This is not a good thing, Jake.
No?
This is not a good thing, no. When Paul Brown took the orange and the brown colors and took them down to Cincinnati and did the Cincinnati Bengals CB as opposed to Cleveland Browns because the man who must not be named fired him and he shouldn't have been fired. He didn't really do any favors to the Browns, and we've always kind of viewed the Bungles as the Bungles. And here they are going to their second Super Bowl, and the Browns have never been. So this is not a good thing. Joe Burrows is a good Ohio State kid who went to LSU to score big, so that's also not a good story. OBJ left the Browns. He's making it big with the Rams. This is kind of all triggering Browns fans.
Well, I'm sorry. I have no stake in the outcome here, except I'm rooting for a good game, and we had two good games yesterday. Although I severely dislike, with all football fans, the overtime rules.
Oh my gosh, they're the worst. I was watching with a diehard Kansas City fan, and I feel his pain when you lose that way. That first half drive. Jake, I want to talk about not losing. The Supreme Court, Justice Breyer stepping down, wonderful guy, spent a couple hours in this studio with me 10 years ago. Wonderful, wonderful guy. Liberal, votes reliably with the left. He'll be replaced by a reliable left vote. It's still a 6-3 court. There isn't going to be a controversy unless it's an Abe Fortas controversy. And that has nothing to do with ideology, only with ethics. And I doubt that they would ever nominate someone who had Abe Fortas' problems. So Democrats want to fight. They're not going to get one. What do you make of my assessment?
I think you're right. I mean, here's what I thought was interesting. Yesterday, you had Lindsey Graham rooting for his home state judge, Michelle Childs, who is obviously up for a federal judgeship in the Palmetto State, but is on the short list. Or I guess the White House does not want us to call it a short list, but it seems pretty short, Hugh. It's about 7 people. Probably 4 of them are real, meaning 4 of them are considered front runners. And I agree with you. I mean, I think that, Susan, people don't remember, and I know you do because you're a very loyal watcher of the court and of the Senate. Susan Collins has voted for every Supreme Court nominee from either party except for Amy Coney Barrett. So you have to assume that absent some crazy circumstance, she's going to vote yes. And I have to imagine they'll keep all Democrats in line. And I wonder, Hugh, if you have any view on the given what you just said, I'm curious for your view on these judges. I'm not a lawyer, you are, so you know more about this than I do. But listen, everything that I hear from people is that Ketanji Brown Jackson, who is, as everybody knows by now, related by marriage distantly to former House Speaker Paul Ryan, she is probably the front runner at this point.
Yeah, I think Judge Brown Jackson is going to be the nominee. But I did hear Lindsey yesterday, and I want to play that for our audience so they can hear Lindsey Graham on Face the Nation talking about the SCOTUS pick, cut number 5.
Well, it's not different to me. Put me in the camp of making sure the court and other institutions look like America. we make a real effort as Republicans to recruit women and people of color to make the party look more like America. Affirmative action is picking somebody not as well qualified for past wrongs. Michelle Childs is incredibly qualified. There's no affirmative action component if you pick her. She is highly qualified. And President Reagan said, running for office, that he wanted to put the first female on the court. Whether you like it or not, Joe Biden said, I'm going to pick an African-American woman to serve on the Supreme Court. I believe there are plenty of qualified African-American women, conservative and liberal, that could go onto the court. So I don't see Michelle Childs as an act of affirmative action. I do see putting a black woman on the court, making the court more like America in the history of the country.
So there you have it, Jake. Lindsey Graham is out there campaigning for Childs. He has about as much input to this as I do, which is none. But when it was Ray Kethledge versus Justice Brett Kavanaugh, I was heavy on the Ray Kethledge side. And I had my views heard by people who mattered in that process. So I took it seriously and wrote about it. Nobody cares what Republicans think about this. And the Republicans voted for Breyer 80 plus votes. They're going to vote for Brown Jackson or Childs or whoever it is by 80 plus. I really think it's going to be an 80 plus vote margin. You'll get people like Senator Cruz and Senator Cotton, who are very able Harvard Law School trained people who will say, wonderful person, don't agree with the judging style, not going to vote to confirm her. But there isn't going to be a battle here, and Joe Biden's not going to get a lift from. I really don't think it's I think it's a net zero for Joe Biden.
So I don't know that I don't think it's going to be 80 plus votes for whoever he chooses. I don't. I just think the times have changed. I will play devil's advocate for you, Hugh. This does have the benefit of, I think, being possibly true. I don't know this 100%. I think Biden, as you know, is a little bit interested. He's bipartisan curious, I would say, is the best way to put it. And maybe if he hears Lindsey Graham, with whom he had a good relationship for 20 plus years, maybe if he hears him saying that Childs is somebody who could bring Republicans along, he gets more interested. I don't know that to be true 100%, but I don't think it's out of left field. But I do think that if you put a Brown Jackson up for nomination, you probably could get 60 votes. I mean, you could. I don't know that you will, but could you get a Susan Collins and a Murkowski and a Roy Blunt and a Rob Portman and all those folks? I think you actually could, and I think that everybody kind of realized that, especially just because this does not change the balance of the court. Like,
okay, Jake, we haven't gone to lunch. Let's bet lunch. Over under 65. What are you saying? Under?
Under, yeah.
Okay, I'm taking the over, and that's lunch, downtown D.C. somewhere. I know you work at the Hill every day, but once in a while you come back.
Hey, listen,
now,
I'm all over the place.
And I've never actually met Jake outside of his studio, so I think that would be fun. Jake,
we actually did. We did. We were on a panel at the Jewish Federation of Los Angeles.
Oh, my gosh, what a memory. You're right.
Yeah.
Oh, my God. All right, so let's talk about Joe Rogan. The aging rock and roll existential crisis. People who were famous 50 years ago trying to be famous again. There is no way Spotify takes Joe Rogan off. I don't agree with Rogan on vaccines and boosters. I've got my vaccine. I got a booster. I got a PhD toxicologist in the family who fills me in on the medicine. He's wrong. Malone was wrong. McCullough's wrong. All these people are wrong. But Joe Rogan is the mall. He built the mall of podcasting. Everyone else is just renting a store in it. It's like Rush Limbaugh built Talk Radio's mall, and I have a storefront in it. They're not going to cancel Joe Rogan. What do you think, Jake Sherman?
No, they will not. They paid him $100 million. It makes no sense for them to cancel him. He's incredibly well listened to. And I don't know if you saw it, Hugh, but this morning or last night, I don't remember. I don't know which one it is, but I watched it this morning. He did a 9-minute straight-to-camera discussion. Have you seen this yet, Hugh?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, it's worth watching. He basically said, listen, I understand where people are coming from. I need to be more careful. I need to do more research. But he also said, listen, the disinformation stuff has gone back and forth. Like if you said 6 months ago or 8 months ago that if you got a vaccine, you could still get COVID, people would have taken you off the platform. If you said 6 months ago that cloth masks were not protective, you would have gotten taken off a platform. So his point is that the science is shifting, and he's trying to show alternative views. I also don't agree with what he says on vaccines or boosters, so I've got nothing to say about his content. I don't listen to him a ton because I find his interviews a bit too long, although I have listened to many of them when they pique my interest, Elon Musk and other people of that nature. But I know that he's not going anywhere. They paid him way too much money.
You know, Jake, the book rule. There's a rule in America that I followed for 30 years. Wherever authors most want to be is the most influential show in America. Authors most want to be on Joe Rogan's podcast right now. They sell a bazillion books. It used to be 60 Minutes. It's not anymore. People don't watch. Used to be the Sunday shows. It's not anymore. People don't watch. Authors want to be on Joe Rogan. So the author's rule, watch where they want to go. He's the most influential broadcaster in America right now. Love him or hate him. It's a reality. You don't want to screw with him. Jake Sherman, Spotify's not going to screw with him. Thank you, Punchbowl News, the most influential newsletter in America right now. Get it in your mail every morning. Just go to punchbowlnews.com and subscribe. Talk to you next week, Jake. Don't go anywhere, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Well, apparently that's not true. This is Dave Matthews covering Neil Young, since we can no longer play Neil Young and Joni Mitchell since we use Spotify for our bumps. We're going to just play covers of their songs because it doesn't really matter. They're not going to fire Joe Rogan. I'm joined now by the Attorney General of the great state of Missouri, Eric Schmitt. Good morning, General Schmitt. Welcome back to the Hugh Hewitt Show.
We're doing great. We are rocking in the free world of Missouri.
I know. There's so many things to talk to you about, General. I want people to know you are also a candidate for the United States Senate. I think you're the front runner in Missouri. But we're not here to talk about that. I want to talk to you about face masks and migrants to the United States. Let's start with face masking. Glenn Youngkin has ordered Virginia schools that face masks be optional for students. Many school districts are resisting him. Do you have the same problem in Missouri?
We do, and we've been pushing back on this for months. So St. Louis County, for example, the political jurisdiction of St. Louis County, has tried to implement mask mandates for the largest county in the state. We have successfully sued them over and over and over in court. We are now taking that fight to the school districts, too. So the important note here, Hugh, is that 90% of the school districts in Missouri don't do this. But there are some that continue to move forward with this forced masking policy. It's not legal. The legislature in Missouri has never delegated this kind of power to force the masking of 5-year-olds or to force the quarantine of healthy kids. They just haven't. So we sued 45 school districts early last week. We're taking them to court. We're going to pry the power away from these bureaucrats and give it back to parents where it belongs. Parents can make these decisions. And I've said this all along, whether it was us leading the charge on the vaccine mandates that we took all the way to the Supreme Court and won, or these mask mandates, individuals can make these decisions. We should not cede this level of control to the government because that's what it's about. It's not about science or data. It's about power and control. And what we know now, Hugh, is, first of all, masking, these cough vests are ineffective. But what we also know is that there's more and more data, even publications like The Atlantic are coming out saying the psychological, social harms to kids way outweigh any benefit you could possibly get from masking, and there really isn't any. So the loss of learning, people being able to relate to folks, the psychological, the ER visits for young girls have gone up dramatically. So we just need to take this into context, give the power back to parents. And one last thing, Hugh, we opened up a tip line in December when we sent these cease and desist letters to school districts. We received 11,000 emails from across Missouri. People have had enough of this. They want their country back, and they want to be able to make their own decisions.
I do not know if you've read yet, Eric Schmitt, the piece by Arthur Herman, superb historian in the Wall Street Journal this morning, Politics in the Great Confinement. He believes we have a 1932-style realignment coming as a result of reaction against heavy-handed government bureaucracies asserting powers not appropriately delegated to them. Do you agree where Arthur Herman is going, that we are seeing people who have never before been involved in politics mobilizing because they've seen their children abused and governments out of control?
I couldn't agree with you more, and you feel it on the ground. And so we're filing a lawsuit against Springfield Public School District for critical race theory. And so I think you saw this come to a head in the Virginia race. You also saw it come to a head when the Biden administration was sicking the FBI on parents who were voicing their concerns at school board meetings. And look, you and I both know, Hugh, the founders were very deliberate about this. They knew that how tyranny had developed over time, how dictators have gotten power. So they created a form of government that spread out power so that no one person, no one branch ever got too powerful, all to protect individual liberty. People are seeing that now in their daily lives. These COVID tyrants at the local level or at the federal level, they want to aggregate, maintain, and exert power. People have had enough, and they're showing up. They should keep showing up. But you see it at school board meetings for sure. You see it at county council meetings. You see it at city council meetings. There's something happening on the ground, Hugh. There's a bubbling up from the ground, and I think there's a reckoning coming in 2022.
I love that line. To aggregate, expand, and maintain their power in fact, the public choice theory of government is that government, once empowered, never gives it back.
That's exactly right. And look, if you're a mayor or a county executive, we've seen it, and your job is, usually you're naming roads or signing budgets. For you to stand up there at that podium on a Monday morning and tell people you're going to keep them safe and we're going to implement these measures, this has been the way of the world throughout human history. But the United States has been different. We're that exception. We believe in American exceptionalism. We believe in individual rights, and the government's just supposed to be that shared project to protect those rights. And they're never going to let this go, Hugh. You watch. You can hear from the Biden administration already what they're signaling. They're not calling it climate change anymore. They're calling it a climate crisis. That's what's next. They want to empower these agencies to do things that they can't get done legislatively. It's why it's important for the states to push back against the federal overreach. It's also why it's important for the states to push back against these political subdivisions of the state to make sure they're not infringing on people's rights either.
Now, to the mask question, because you are in court, you're going to have to make an argument. And I think CDC has conceded the cloth masks never worked. Is there any factual basis for masking children? What is their argument? Because as the Atlantic article you referenced pointed out, it's basically back down. We don't know how bad COVID is, so we're going to take measures about which the effectiveness is inconclusive because we're afraid. It's an argument from fear, not science.
Yeah, exactly. They've been pushing this fear-mongering. And by the way, the corporate media has been gleefully going along with this, trying to scare people because I guess it gets clicks. But here's the truth. A child is more likely to be struck by lightning than to die from COVID, more likely to drown than to die from COVID, more likely to die in a car accident from COVID. The flu is much more dangerous for a child than COVID. Well, you don't hear any of that. And why don't you hear it? Because they want to keep this going. They want to continue to push these efforts to make it look like they're in charge, that they're doing something, but in fact, it is really harming kids. And that is what the science and the data shows us now. So it's time for them to step away from the COVID power and the COVID tyranny that they've tried to accumulate. Let people go about their lives. And I think for us, and as conservatives, Americans, we need to be proudly pushing back here because this is not who we are. I think these are much bigger issues, whether it's the vaccine mandate or the forced masking of kids. These are bigger issues about who we are as a country, who we've been, who we are now, who we're going to be. We've been the freest country in the history of the world. I don't want to live in some, dystopian biomedical security state. They're never going to let this go, and we have to push back on every front.
Eric Schmitt, well said. Now, Attorney General, let's turn to the other case, which is the unregulated release of people who've entered the country illegally by the Biden administration. What are you attempting to accomplish as Attorney General of Missouri in the courts?
Well, it's been a disaster. So Missouri partnered with Texas and filed a lawsuit against the Remain in Mexico. Joe Biden changed the Remain in Mexico policy that President Trump had, which was very successful, which basically said, if you're coming here seeking asylum, and by the way, 9 out of 10 of those claims are bogus, but if you're coming here, Mexico's the waiting room because we don't want to just release you into the interior of the United States, never to see you again. That's what Biden reversed Trump's policy, did that. We took that all the way to the Supreme Court last fall and won. Now we're fighting with the Biden administration to actually implement that. We've also filed a lawsuit to complete the border wall. Congress has appropriated $4 million to do it. The president does not have the authority to not spend that money on that. So we filed a lawsuit on that as well. We're going to continue to push back. And I think also, Hugh, these midnight drop-offs and the lecturing we get about the sovereignty of borders elsewhere, but not here in the United States, people are tired of this. They want to know that the rule of law actually matters, that you have a president that is going to secure our southern border. I was down at the border last week with a number of AGs. The amount of fentanyl coming into our communities, and these are not just in border towns, Hughes. This is in Ohio, this is in Missouri, this is in Colorado. It takes about 2 days for that to go anywhere in the country. Human trafficking, a tragedy here, $100 million worth of value of human smuggling per week. And so as AGs, we take on these issues like human trafficking. Missouri led a multi-state coalition just a few months ago. It's a disaster down there. A porous border is not safe, and it's not compassionate either.
I did not know that you had brought an impoundment lawsuit. Impoundment has been unconstitutional since Richard Nixon tried it in the 70s, and that's where Congress makes a specific appropriation, the president doesn't spend it. That's an unconstitutional impoundment. When did you file that? Because I was unaware of that lawsuit, General Schmitt.
We filed that, I think, in October, Hugh, and so we're moving that along as quickly as we can, too. Yeah, listen, I think it's incumbent. The states created the federal government to be a government of limited powers, again, to protect individual liberty. By the way, protecting the border happens to be one of those limited powers. So we're going to continue to push back. We've been successful. Those are two big high-profile wins Missouri's had now at the Supreme Court on the vaccine mandate case, on the Remain in Mexico case, and we're not going to take our foot off the gas.
Attorney General Eric Schmitt of Missouri, thank you for joining me. How goes the Senate race? We got about 30 seconds.
It's going great. I mean, look, people want a fighter, and that's what we're doing. They want somebody who's never going to quit on the state. That's been my record. We're pushing back. We're taking a blowtorch to Biden's radical agenda. We're winning, and we'll take that same fighting spirit to the Senate. We need reinforcements to save America.
Eric Schmitt, great to talk to you. Keep coming back. I want to follow these lawsuits. I think the attorney generals of the United States are the front line against masks on kids and against border just permeability, and Eric Schmitt is showing the way in Missouri. Thank you, Attorney General Schmitt. I want to update you on the breaking news. Boris Johnson will address the House of Commons at 3:30 in Great Britain. It is now 12:40 in Great Britain. And when he does that, we will know how deep the trouble he is in. I do not know what's in the Gray Report. Nobody does. I'm looking at all the newspapers. The Gray Report is the report on the Prime Minister and his team partying during COVID lockdowns. It has gripped him in a scandal which has threatened to topple his premiership. The 1922 committee requires, I believe, 52 letters from members of Parliament requesting a vote of no confidence, in which, of course, Labour would join, toppling the Prime Minister, as happened to Theresa May because she fumbled on Brexit. Boris Johnson delivered on Brexit 2 years ago today, as a matter of fact, effectively getting Great Britain out of the European Union, and God bless him for that. But will he survive this? I don't know. I don't know what's in the report, but I'm watching and keeping it in front of me every minute of every hour. Welcome back, America. On the Hugh Hewitt Show, we're playing covers of Neil Young and Joni Mitchell since they've exiled themselves in a vain attempt, and I mean vain as in V-A-I-N, attempt to cancel Joe Rogan. Josh Kraushaar joins me now. Hotline, Josh. Josh, you listen to Rogan. I don't, but my boys do. You're in their demo. Do you listen to him?
Not usually, other than the clips that emerge here and there. But I understand his appeal with a lot of listeners.
What is his appeal? What do you think it is?
Well, look, I think he's he's basically the guy who dares say what other people think, but don't want to say out loud. And I also think just it's talk radio. In the 80s and 90s, like that was what talk radio was all about. That you'd have. This wasn't news. There was a news element to it, but you just have Howard Stern was the most successful talk radio host because he stuck his middle finger at the establishment.
I think actually Rush had a larger audience than Howard, but I could be corrected on that.
Well, right, yeah. I mean, the golden age of talk radio, was premised on the same secret sauce that Joe Rogan has found. And
you are exactly right. You are exactly. I told people that I started in this business in 1990. Rush built the mall. I just have a big store in it. Joe Rogan built the podcasting mall. People don't know it yet. Yep. Everyone's got a storefront in it.
Yeah, it's the authenticity too. I mean, that's what. Your average person who doesn't doesn't pay attention 24/7 to the news, but wants to hear just ordinary guy talk, ordinary authentic conversation, and they're not looking for fact checkers to police people's normal conversations on the radio or on podcasts. That's the appeal of the format.
Now, I also want to get your take, Josh, because you're pretty smart about this stuff. Arthur Herman has a piece in the Wall Street Journal today, Politics in the Great Confinement. in which he posits a 1932 style realignment in reaction to COVID shutdown. Now, I just wrote a Washington Post column calling on the president to fire everyone on his COVID team, including Fauci and Walensky and Zients. And I know what parents think about masking in school, but do you think there's a realignment underway?
I don't know if I'd go so far to say realignment, because this is a moment in time. I mean, I hope that after 2022 that COVID, becomes endemic and we're not talking about it every day. But I think there is a moment in time where you have these interesting alliances between liberals like Colorado Governor Jared Polis and, Matt Iglesias, formerly of, Slade and Vox, joining forces with a lot of the more, public health bureaucracy skeptical Republicans. And then there's an interesting alliance taking place. I personally do think there's a much larger silent majority against the bureaucracy, against all the regulations. And, people may not want to say it out loud, but you just saw last week, Michelle Goldberg wrote a column in the New York Times saying it's time to phase out the masks in schools, right? You had NPR doing a segment on Morning Edition saying the exact same thing, showing real frustration with the public health bureaucracy. So I think we're getting close to a moment where, Biden and a lot of these Democrats that are preaching caution and having this regulatory stance are going to be totally out of step with where the majority of the American people are.
I agree with that completely. I also think you're not going to want to be an incumbent this year. And at both parties, incumbents have trouble. And the reason is very simple, that people want to spit out the last 2 years. Because everything has been wrong, and it's not been wrong because people sincerely wanted to be wrong. The vaccines are a great medical breakthrough. The boosters are very good. So science has got the job done, but government has screwed up at every level, and I think incumbents are going to get crushed, Josh.
Yeah, and I also would say that the arrogance, everyone makes mistakes. No one's perfect. I think having humility is just an essential task, whether you're a public health official or you're a politician. And there's been a stunning lack of humility with the governing class in COVID and a lot of other things. And I think that is one of the biggest problems, among other things, that Democrats are facing in this midterm election, that they overpromised, they underdelivered when it comes to the economy, when it comes to the state of COVID. And there's a lot of frustrated Americans out there that go far beyond Republicans. So I mean, they're facing the backlash of a governing party that's dealing with their first midterm, but they're also dealing with a whole lot of frustrated and disillusioned Americans that just were overpromised things that they didn't get in the first 2 years or the first year.
Josh, I want to test out a definition on you. You used the term governing class, and I've been trying for a long time to define, it's the Manhattan Beltway elite, but I've actually come up with a broader definition. The governing class, anyone who goes every year at least twice to Washington, D.C. is part of the governing class. How do you like my definition?
Well, what does that mean for people who live in D.C.?
You're part of the governing class. You're part of the governing, and so I am, and you are, and the governing class lives there. But if you go there twice a year or more, you're also part of it.
I mean, that's a pretty good definition. there are also like elites in both parties, and there are elites on the liberal and conservative side. So yeah, I mean, there definitely is a disconnect. I mean, one of the more interesting things in politics is you don't just see a partisan divide, but you see sort of a class divide within both the Democratic and Republican parties, and then that's something that's going to manifest itself in the coming years as well.
It is, and I will be on special report tonight, by the way, with Brett Barrett, programming note for everyone. But this Saturday, I'm moderating a debate among Arizona would-be GOP Senate nominees and among Arizona would-be gubernatorial nominees in Arizona. So this week is all Arizona. Josh Kraushaar can send me questions because Josh probably knows more about the Arizona races than I do. But I'm going to study all week. So I encourage you, if you have questions for the candidates for the GOP nomination for Senate in Arizona or governorship, send them to me. I'm moderating debates again on this weekend. What I love to do, especially when the Browns are in the off-season mode. Don't go anywhere, America. Stay on this station. Come back tomorrow for the next Hugh Hewitt Show. Thank you, Hotline Josh.